What if the God of Moses was written by men you've never heard of? Not prophets, not angels, but scribes, locked behind palace walls, temple elites, political survivors, ghostwriters of eternity. Because the Torah, that sacred fire at the heart of Judaism, didn't fall from the sky. It was assembled across centuries under foreign rule, in exile, on scrolls passed hand to hand in the shadows. So then, who were the ones pulling the threads? Who decided what counted as divine truth and what was just erased? Some called them the Yahwist, the Elohist, the priestly faction. But they had no Twitter handles, no book deals, just ink, ideology, and the audacity to speak for God. And somewhere in this web, Moses stopped being a man. He became a myth, a symbol, a tool. This is not the story you heard in Sunday school. This is the hidden architecture of faith, chiseled beneath centuries of silence. Welcome to Deep Rewind. We all know how it goes. A baby in a basket, set adrift on the Nile, raised in Pharaoh's palace, yet chosen by a different power. He kills a man, runs, wanders into the wilderness. And there, in the fire that doesn't burn, God speaks, "Let my people go." He returns to Egypt, staff in hand, calls down plagues, splits seas, leads a nation through sand and silence, up a mountain, into a covenant. It's epic, divine, carved into stone and memory. But ask yourself, where did this version come from? Who wrote it down? And when? Because here's the thing. For centuries, there were no scrolls, no 5 books, no Genesis, no Exodus, just oral fragments, songs, myths, politics in disguise. And Moses? He may not have written a word. What if he was written into the story, long after his bones had turned to dust? What if Moses, the lawgiver, the liberator, was shaped not by miracles, but by editors with agendas? If that's true, then the story we know isn't wrong. It's just incomplete. And what comes next changes everything. Let's strip away the illusion of a single author. The Torah, those first 5 books of the Bible, reads like one voice. But under the surface, it fractures. It doesn't just repeat stories, it contradicts them. Twice we meet creation. Twice we hear of the flood. Names for God shift like masks. Yahweh here, Elohim there. Why? Because what we call Moses' book may actually be a stitched-together patchwork from 4 different voices, each with their own agenda. Scholars call this the documentary hypothesis. J, the Yahwist, the raw, earthy storyteller. E, the Elohist, distant, moralistic, northern. D, the Deuteronomist, political, reformist, obsessed with centralized worship. And P, the priestly source, ritual-heavy, chronological, obsessed with purity and power. They weren't sitting in the same room. They lived across different centuries, kingdoms, empires. But their words, carefully, deliberately, were woven into one. By whom? By redactors, editors, scribes serving kings, temples, or perhaps survival itself. This wasn't about deception, it was preservation. A shattered nation needed a shared memory, even if it was fused from competing myths. So instead of burning the fragments, they combined them, layered the contradictions like code, wrapped identity in narrative, and out of that chaos came scripture, not dictated by lightning, but curated by men in the shadows. Now the question shifts. Why did they do it? And what were they afraid of losing? They weren't prophets. They weren't kings. They were priests. And after Babylon reduced Jerusalem to dust, they became the last architects of memory. Temple gone, monarchy crushed, the ark vanished. What remained? Ink. Enter the priestly source, calm, cold, exacting. Where J gave us passion and betrayal, P gives us order. Chronologies, genealogies, sacred measurements. Creation isn't a wild poetic burst. It's a 7-day blueprint, structured, separated, controlled. Why? Because P wasn't just writing about the past. He was rebuilding a cosmic temple on paper. A world where priests mattered, where rituals weren't optional. They were the scaffolding of survival. In exile, power shifted. Without a king, the priesthood became the spine of identity. They wrote purity laws, declared who was clean, who was cut off. They replaced sacrifice with scripture, stone with scroll. And over time, P's voice, meticulous, liturgical, impersonal, began to dominate. Even God changes. No more walking in gardens or wrestling at night. P's God doesn't weep or laugh. He commands. He ordains. He exists behind a veil, unreachable, like a king behind temple doors. And Moses? In P's version, he becomes less man, more mechanism, a mouthpiece, a lawgiver, a sacred puppet. So ask yourself, was Moses chosen by God or chosen by priests to be the perfect symbol? A man who speaks for God, but answers to them. Because sometimes the pen isn't guided by faith, it's guided by power. They lost everything. The temple burned, the monarchy shattered, the ark gone without a trace. In 586 BCE, Babylon didn't just conquer Judah, it cracked open its soul. The elite were marched off in chains. Zion's songs turned to silence. How do you worship a God who let his house fall? That's when something unexpected happened. The religion didn't die, it mutated. Without a temple, they built texts. Without land, they remembered stories. And for the first time, Judaism wasn't tied to a place. It was tied to a book. In exile, scribes became sages. They edited, rewrote, reframed. What was once oral became sacred scripture. New laws emerged, not from the mountain, but from memory. Old stories were recut to fit new wounds. This wasn't just survival. It was reinvention. The people of Judah didn't vanish. They became Jews, children of the text, not the throne. And out of Babylon's ashes rose a strange truth. Sometimes a nation isn't born in victory, but in loss. Sometimes faith doesn't begin on the mountain. It begins in exile. It was the year 622 BCE. The boy King Josiah, now grown, ordered the temple cleaned. What they found changed everything. A scroll, buried deep, forgotten or hidden. They called it the Book of the Law. You know it today as Deuteronomy. And suddenly Josiah wasn't just king, he became chosen. Because this book said so. It spoke of one God, one temple, one place of worship, Jerusalem. It warned of doom if laws were broken. It predicted Josiah himself. Too convenient? Some scholars believe Deuteronomy wasn't discovered. It was written, right then, by reformers in Josiah's court, shaping history in real time. They gave Moses new speeches, new laws, a second telling, Deuteronomos. But behind Moses' voice, you can almost hear the scribes crafting a national myth for a kingdom under siege. Josiah enforced the text with fire, destroyed rural shrines, centralized worship. It was bold. It was radical. It was too late. He died in battle. His reforms collapsed, but the book remained. And that book, it would outlive empires, because paper sometimes is sharper than swords. Let's say it plainly. Moses probably didn't write the Torah. The timelines don't match. The language evolved centuries later. He dies before the story ends, yet still appears after. So does that unravel the faith? Or does it reveal something deeper? Maybe the power of Moses isn't in authorship, but in authorship being assigned, a vessel, not a pen, because stories aren't just told, they're curated, across generations, across trauma. They're sharpened in exile, rewritten in courts, recited in whispers under foreign kings. Moses becomes a symbol, a way to bind it all together. The law, the journey, the voice of the divine. He's not just a prophet, he's a bridge. And maybe that's the point. Whether he wrote it or not, his name anchors a story still unfolding, a story that refuses to die, not because it's perfect, but because it was needed, and maybe it still is. So, who wrote the Torah? A prophet in the desert? A priest in exile? A king's scribe trying to save a dying nation? Maybe the question was never about authorship. Maybe it was about memory, survival, because what survives isn't always what's true. It's what's needed enough to be copied, chanted, carried, smuggled past conquerors, tattooed into the bones of a people. What if Moses is less a man and more a mirror, a reflection of what a civilization wanted to believe when everything else was burning? And yet somehow it worked. A scattered people held together by ink, parchment, fire. You don't have to believe it all, but you have to ask yourself, what kind of story survives 3,000 years? And more importantly, what kind of story are you living inside right now?